it's still like to this day, I still hold a crazy grudge. I know everyone's supposed to be cool with each other, and I see even when I go to the skate park, there's skateboarders and rollerbladers and guys on scooters, and everyone's pretty chill. And obviously, I'm not gonna go around beating anybody up or anything, but man, I've sat in
They don't want to
rooms
play with
where
you.
yeah, I've sat in rooms and like heard. I mean, it was all built on rollerblading. If you go back to the first X Games, I mean, I did shows with Tony Hawk where I was sitting next to Aton. Where were we? Santa Rosa, I think it was. And man, Tony Hawk went up to Aton and was asking Aton if he had an extra set of. I don't know, it wasn't Tony Hawk. It was Andy McDonald, another big name pro. Came up to Aton, was like, "Hey man, do you have any bearings?" Like skateboarders couldn't even get a set of bearings. And when the X Games first started, it was built on the explosion of rollerblading in the world. Like rollerblading was it. It was the pinnacle, like biggest part, whatever. And man, to watch that shift and watch that change and know that it was happening, not because of the skating. Like the skating was getting ridiculous. Like what was being done on rollerblades during that, like once you get to 2001, around that time, that's when it got absolutely insane everywhere. Like if you look at the difference in tricks from 98 to 2001, 2002, especially on Bird, like what the Yastoko started doing, Sessa throwing just monster friggin' 1080s, Shane Yoss doing crazy, like it was insane, absolutely insane. It scared the
Right.
crap out of me, like watching them and then possibly trying to attempt that stuff. Meanwhile, I get called into a room, and this is just a true story. I get called into a room where there's people from ESPN basically telling us that you know rollerblading's dying, like we can't promote. And I don't want to shit on anybody, but at the time, and I love the guy, I really do. The guy's a nice guy, but Ty Chris was doing really well in competition, and he was promoting himself a lot. And the ESPN was basically blaming that we didn't have enough like huge American stars to promote on TV. Like skateboarding had Bucky Lassick, Andy McDonald, Tony Hawk. Uh, BMXing had Matt Hoffman, Dave Mirra, rest in peace. Um, and in rollerblading back then, the big names, we had the Yastoko brothers, we had Ty Chris, we had all of these guys that were becoming big, and they were blaming it on that. But then I'd sit in another room where literally the skateboarders are just full on saying that they want rollerblading out, that it's friggin' weak, it makes us look bad, they're whatever. And man, they shit on us so much harder than probably most people know to get us kind of booted out of there. And it's 100%, like 100%. Rollerblading left the X Games for no other reason other than the top people in skateboarding basically said that either rollerblading goes or we're not going to support you anymore.
No, I was gonna ask about the B3 days because that brings along to when B3 was a thing. For people who don't know, it was bikes, boards, and blades, I guess it stood for. But everyone was together. I mean, it's kind of similar to the X Games too, but they promoted it as all three like together. Was it as bad as it seemed then, or like how was that?
Yeah, I mean they ESPN was constantly trying to make sure that and they catered so heavy to the skateboarding people, and we they would try to like push us off the course, make sure that we were nowhere near it when the skateboarders wanted to be there. Like it's such a chill vibe when you go to the skate parks now, or even just skating around downtown. Like everyone's super cool with each other, and I think a lot of it just had to do back in those days. There was a pretty significant age gap between the core group of pro skateboarders and the top names in rollerblading, where you had like our best guys, like the guys that were kind of the most famous, especially the most famous US skaters, were all younger kids that were just thrashing it on street. And man, they didn't want to go, and man, God bless them for it, they didn't want to like cater to the cameraman and sit there and do a bunch of interviews. They wanted to skate, and man, that's great. But on the flip side of that, you got guys like Bucky Lassick on a skateboard that, and and what's that other guy, Bob Burnquist or Tony Hawk or whatever, which, and they loved when the cameras came out, and they'd give the camera crew all the time they wanted to promote their sport or whatever, and you know, it just took it in two different directions. But you're right, I guarantee you, if they're, and I wish it did. I've heard you guys talk about in the past, the possibility of rollerblading going back into the X Games, and if it does, and I'll be its biggest fan, and I'll be watching every single day. But I really, personally, I really really hope it does. I think the sport has become something that's just so far above and beyond. Like there's a couple other sports out there. If you ever watch guys on BMX now, like that sport has progressed
Oh yeah.
insane. Like the things they're doing on bikes now are insane. Same thing with snowboarding and same thing with rollerblading. And I think having a platform like X Games to show it to the world, and it would blow up overnight.